From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions, this is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
And also, let's talk about open carry, because that's really kind of the focus of what we're talking about today. And right now they're upholding what House members have been allowed to do, and that is carry a weapon in committee meetings.
Right. It's really interesting to see that you can't have a firearm in the General Assembly in the gallery. But you are allowed, and there was a proposed rule change banning firearms at committee meetings, but you're allowed to do it as we start this session.
And we're talking about the House,
We're talking about the House, not the Senate. So it's interesting, you can't bring a poster, a placard, or demonstrative aid, but if you're sitting there debating with your colleagues, you are allowed to have a gun with you as you legislate here in the state of Tennessee.
Let me ask you this, as an attorney and a citizen, why would someone need a gun in a committee meeting?
That's a great question. And it would seem that if there were concern, well, one, it's your Second Amendment right. So I guess on one end of the spectrum, you don't have to need a reason to carry a firearm.
But you can't have one in the General Assembly.
You can't have one in the General Assembly. But that kind of begs the question, why would our state representatives feel in meetings that are somewhat limited to the public as they're debating public policy, bills, etc., have a firearm on their person?
Is it just sending a message?
And it may be, and I don't know what that message is.
I was going to ask you what that message is.
And be careful what you ask for, because, you know, time after time since 2021, when we changed the law to allow open carry here in the state of Tennessee, people get arrested for aggravated assault. Anytime you use a weapon to intimidate, scare, put someone in imminent fear of bodily harm, brandishing, it's a crime. So, yeah, if you're in there and you're having a heated discussion as you're debating a bill in a committee meeting, and you touch the gun and you say, or, hey, you're out of line, you need to be quiet. Because if you remember when the debate involving the Tennessee 3 emerged, there was some really hot, heated, vitriolic, acrimonious discourse, and they flat got it. I mean, they were in each other's face doing this.
Yeah, they were. That'll go down in history. And speaking of the Tennessee 3, I'm looking at my notes here. Justin Jones, one of the three, a Democrat from Nashville, proposed to prohibit the carrying of firearms inside committee rooms. But again, House Rules Committee overwhelmingly said, no, we're going to keep that as it is.
So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out if during the course of a heated debate, an argument, whether someone intentionally, inadvertently touches, brandishes a weapon, and see how that plays out. But, you know, the Sergeant of Arms now is really the Sergeant of Arms here at the General Assembly. But
I see what you're doing there.
Yeah.
Last year, let's look at this. We've got some stats for you, if you will. Last year, about 30 guns were allowed into the Cordell Hull building during the first 2 days of session. House members, again, will not be, like you said, will not be permitted to bring papers or visual aids into the House chamber or committee rooms, but they can bring their gun. It's just very interesting.
It is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how they behave as it relates to having a firearm on their person. Because, you know, Nashville has been very heated. There's a lot of hot topics before the General Assembly this year.
Especially since the Covenant school shooting. And let's talk about that. When we look at that tragedy and what people said did not happen legislatively in that special session.
Yeah, Governor Lee, in response to the very unfortunate Covenant school shooting, called a special session of the General Assembly and wanted to do some reform
Back
as it
in
relates to
August.
firearms
Yeah.
back in August. And, a lot of his major policy changes didn't pass. But one thing that didn't happen was there was a move to lower the open carry age. And remember, in Tennessee, you can open carry a handgun if you have a legal right, you're not a convicted felon,
Right.
You've not been convicted of stalking, have an order of protection anywhere without a permit. Can't have a shotgun or a rifle.
And open carry doesn't apply to that anyway, right? It's just handguns.
Right, but there was a movement to lower the age from 21 to 18, and since post Covenant school shooting, they decided to kind of put that on hold and put it under the table.
They did, and it's so interesting that the Tennessee Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti, announced that people between 18 and 20 will not be prosecuted for carrying a handgun without a permit.
Interesting, because the job of the Tennessee Attorney General is to enforce the laws of the state of Tennessee, and he said, well, we're not going to pass a bill lowering the age from 21 to 18, but I'm directing law enforcement not to enforce the law.
Isn't that scary?
It seems to me to be even if you agree or disagree, very arbitrary and authoritarian that an attorney general can pick and choose and direct law enforcement what laws to enforce and what laws not to enforce.
Right, especially with this.
Yeah.
And the State Highway Patrol has been instructed to not issue citations for such 18 to 20-year-olds, as we just said.
And, since 2021, when the legislature passed the open carry law, it has created nothing but confusion. And even here in East Tennessee, there have been cases where people have open carried at Walmart businesses, and they've been arrested by police because police don't think it would be absurd that someone can walk around with a 45 on their person, and they've been educated that the law says here you can walk the streets with firearms. So very interesting, but
I'd like to know what you all think. Weigh in with your comments. We'd like to hear from you on this.
And Lori, this is really, a really interesting legal Second Amendment issue, because it's not trying to limit or ban firearms or particular kinds of firearms. It's just your right to openly have a gun on your person in public whenever. Now, one thing this didn't do was limit businesses the ability to say firearms are prohibited, no firearms allowed, and if that is posted on a restaurant, a
Health club, I've
bar,
seen them
health
there.
club,
Yeah.
then you are not permitted to do it.
Right,
And
that's
now-
the business's right.
But here in Tennessee, if you are in a bar or restaurant that serves alcohol, if you're not drinking or consuming alcohol and they don't have the notice prohibiting firearms, you're well within your rights to take that firearm with you.
So interesting. Let's
very
go back,
interesting.
if you're just joining us, we want to go back to this whole issue of open carry and the fact that if you're in the House, you can in committee meetings. If you're in the Senate, you cannot.
Right. It's very interesting. And like we said at the beginning, it's going to be interesting when those committee meetings get heated. And, no one thinks that someone's going to get shot or harmed by firearm. But I think as the temperature rises, it's going to be very tempting for someone to say, hey, you need to be quiet, sit down, touch the firearm. And what you have done is transformed your right to open carry into a Class C felony for brandishing a deadly weapon. So from the law's perspective, you people talk about the Second Amendment. Second Amendment, I'm all for, all in the Second Amendment.
Right.
But what they forget is a gun and firearm under Tennessee law and most federal statutes is a dangerous / deadly weapon. So think of it in those terms. You are possessing and carrying a deadly weapon on your person, and you can't touch it. You can't use it.
So what's the point?
What's the point? So I imagine if we're getting overrun by terrorists or whatever, they would have the ability to defend themselves. But, you have a deadly weapon, you have a deadly temptation affixed to your body. And
And it can't go anywhere.
And it can't go anywhere because if you do, you've committed a felony.
You're
so
in trouble.
I
Very
think
interesting.
sometimes the people that make the laws don't think through what the law really means.
Really?
Well, it's as they say, if you ever saw sausage being made, you'd become a vegetarian and wouldn't eat breakfast. I think
See
this
what pigs eat. Yeah.
see what pigs eat. I think this is a great example of why these legislatures, who are under a microscope since covenant on gun reform, gun control, enforcement protocols, parameters, carrying guns in committee meetings.
And when you're talking about the covenant parents, because this goes back to the signs, carrying signs in the gallery, carrying signs in committee meetings, and they're not allowed to do that anymore. They can carry a small sign.
8.5 by 11. A
Letter-sized.
Letter-sized.
Yeah.
So, one thing that has taken a hit as the General Assembly opens up this year is the First Amendment. Because not only have they limited what you can do in terms of expressing your free speech, your political speech, but they've limited access to the gallery significantly.
More than half.
More than half. John Q. Public could be there. And that's the
And isn't
hotbed.
that the public's right to be
Well,
able to
that's-
witness these proceedings?
Well, that's the right, and it's protest. And whether you're red, white, blue, President Trump even made that analogy when he talked about January 6th. It's the downtown, the town square where people debate political discourse. And in Tennessee, you should have the right to be in that gallery and
Right.
express your opinions. But what they've done is they've cut it in half, limited access to VIP tickets that each member has, and then the rest of the majority are going to the media.
Yeah, I've got it right here. Stringent rules enacted, and this was back during the special session, but just to remind you, members who are ruled by the House Speaker to be out of order can be barred from debate. We went over all of that. But let's go back to House members not being permitted to bring papers or visual aids to support whatever their argument is. But then members of the public can still carry paper-sized signs. But again, they may not bring large signs, props, anything like that to get their message across. Just kind of underscoring what we've been talking about.
Well, and if you really think about it, it's almost this constitutional potpourri where they've tried to limit certain things. The First Amendment. They've tried to enhance certain things like the Second Amendment. They've danced around gun reform and open carry. So,
You've got constituents here, you've got parents here saying we want our kids to be safe, and then where do you make these decisions?
On the opening day, you heard school children talk about, please make us safe this year.
They're afraid to go to school.
They're
So
afraid
many
to go to
kids
school.
are.
But if you think about it, why limit our fundamental constitutional rights? One, to be present and be involved in political speech. That gallery should be open to all Tennesseans, regardless of their beliefs. Why have to limit or allow or disallow firearms? It makes no sense to me. The Senate, you can't have them. You can have them in a committee meeting. The other thing is why can't you have a placard that says "I disagree," or if they wanted to say John 3:16, a fundamental
Whatever
part.
you feel you need to say.
Right, and that's the place to say it. That's the town square where we debate public policy. We talk about keeping our children safe. We talk about ensuring our constitutional freedoms are protected. But it seems like this year the General Assembly is trying to limit a lot of those basic fundamental rights.
Town square is changing.
Town square is changing.
All right, let's talk about more of this at 5:30, yes?
I look forward to it.
All right, join us there on the air. We'll see you then.